It's Indiana and UCLA. The two teams are going to meet later on in the season on the football field. Plus, there's all sorts of drama on the basketball side. It's a Locked On crossover edition of Hoosiers and UCLA.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome in. It is a Locked On crossover edition of Hoosiers and UCLA. It is Indiana and the Bruins. I'm Jacob Goins, host of Locked On Hoosiers. He is Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer of Locked On UCLA. And this crossover edition of Hoosiers and UCLA is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. Well, Zach, we're going to talk all sorts of things on the show today. We'll get basketball on the way out because there's some drama. There was some possible coaching movement on these two teams. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. Plus, what this game is going to mean between the Hoosiers and the Bruins that is taking place later in the football season. But we need to update each other's audiences here on what the heck these two teams look like from last year to this year. Because this game a year ago, we didn't really know what it was going to be going in. And then Indiana jumped all over them, went out to the Rose Bowl. And this was really what kickstarted Indiana's season. Not sure how you guys took it out there in Los Angeles.
I definitely think everybody was laughing at UCLA. It felt like that was an embarrassment. UCLA was coming off the shaky performance against Hawaii, and then they had the week off, and then it's like Big Ten game against Indiana. You're like, okay. And then they got blitzed. And it was like, this is embarrassing. Is this how Deshaun Foster starts his home record and home resume at the Rose Bowl? And then we saw Indiana was like, wait a minute. They kept winning, and they kept winning, and they kept winning. They made it to the playoff, and they were respectable in that playoff game, in my opinion. So it was like, wait a minute. UCLA never got the, I don't know if it's respect, but they shouldn't have been hated on as much as they should have, as they were at the time. Right. Would you feel the same way, Jacob? I feel like UCLA got hated on, and Indiana was like, oh, we're here. We're loving it. And reality, Indiana was good.
Yeah, I mean, Indiana was good, and we didn't know what that Indiana team was going to be. And, I've been asked so many times on, what game was it that you knew, okay, Indiana's good? And you could look at the UCLA game. You could look at the Maryland game. You could look at Nebraska. But UCLA was the first one because it was so early in the season. It was cross-country, Big Ten opener. It was like, all right, what's going to happen here? We really didn't know. And then it was like, oh, okay. Then the questions were, well, what does this say more about Indiana or more about UCLA, yada, yada. And look, I don't think UCLA was bad. They just weren't up to Indiana's level for what the Hoosiers were to become. But I'm with you. I think the Bruins got drugged for this game, and hopefully that respect came back around towards the end of the season.
Yeah, I hope so too. I mean, for UCLA, it was quite interesting in that one. And then, after all was said and done, they ended the season well. So you think about it, there weren't that many teams that just destroyed UCLA. Indiana brought it to them in the Rose Bowl. And you saw Iowa struggle. Minnesota took to the very end. There was a lot of fun games in there, but I wonder what it'll look like this year in Bloomington.
Yeah, this game's going to be taking place in Bloomington on Saturday, October 25th. And this is past the halfway point of the season. We'll talk about where this is on each other's schedule, kind of what happens before and what happens after. But UCLA was kind of the talk of the offseason, my friend, with a new quarterback. What's his name out there in California? Who's playing at UCLA now?
You got Nico Iamaleava. UCLA won the month of April. It wasn't April Fool's. It was the month of April in the transfer portal. I didn't think the spring transfer portal window would yield so much attention and so much talent for UCLA in this upcoming season, but it really did. There was a lot more that came in than just Nico, but Nico is the talk of the town. He was the talk of college football. UCLA became, oh, they're linked to him. And I was like, okay, we didn't really know. We thought, okay, that's just a connection. And then the Bruins went out and made it happen with Nico Iamaleava as quarterback. And the real question is, will he stay a year, 2 years? He has 3 years of eligibility. Very unlikely that he goes and stays at UCLA for 3 years. And it's a unique question if he stays for more than 2. But the UCLA Bruins have a capable quarterback in Tino Sunseri's year 1 as the offensive coordinator for UCLA. And certainly have an athletic guy as QB1 with plenty of talent around him offensively if they can keep him upright.
Well, I'll say, if there's anybody that can make Nico better than he already is, it is Tino Sunseri. We were heartbroken to lose him from Indiana. But I got to ask, after all the drama unfolded and kind of now that the dust has settled, if you will, or now that the kind of the news and the headlines have passed, I mean, Nico's the quarterback. He's a transfer guy. He's the quarterback of UCLA. All the NIL money drama is now gone. What's the feeling about him as a quarterback and him leading the offense? And then what's going to be around him as well out there in LA?
Well, it's interesting because there was a whole spring practice. Nico was pretty much going to the spring game for Tennessee and then walked out on the Volunteers. And UCLA was in the middle of spring practice. So all these guys were learning this offense. They had a lot of quarterbacks in their quarterback room. And then they all transferred out for the most part. And then Nico spent no spring practice with the new offensive coordinator to practice. The benefit, though, for Nico is he's on a semester system at Tennessee, gets out mid to late May. UCLA's on the quarter system. So he's going to have a big gap of time when it comes to no school time, just sitting there playing football into late September before he has to actually focus on academics. This is just time he can look to improve his skills on the football field and mostly learn the playbook, which the entire UCLA offense is doing. Deshaun Foster did a lot to improve the roster with his overhaul on the staff, recruiting, the coaching staff, players-wise. They have Javian Thomas, a new running back in the backfield that can add some depth. I thought UCLA's receivers were solid with what they have returning. I know Logan Loya and J. Michael Sturdivant were big names that left. I'm not really afraid that UCLA's receivers will do nothing. I'll see what the tight end production will be, but the biggest thing is UCLA couldn't run the ball, and they couldn't protect the quarterback last year. And Indiana truly dominated the line of scrimmage, and in most games, the Bruins didn't protect the quarterback, Ethan Garbers, during the season in 24. If they keep Nico upright, he has a chance to be super successful regardless of the win-loss record.
Yeah, UCLA, I think like top 20 transfer portal class, including Nico, a lot of guys around him as well. And I mean, that's going to be the question when these two teams get together is, okay, what positions kind of rise above the other? Which quarterback performs better? Is it the transfer in Nico Iamaleava, or is it the transfer in Fernando Mendoza, a guy that you are probably familiar with who played
UCLA was in on him too. They really wanted him. And then
Yeah,
all of a sudden you're like, we'll take Joey Aguilar. And then eventually they get Nico. What do you think about your side, Jacob, in your quarterback situation? That was a big get early in the portal season, and we're not even talking about that.
Yeah, huge get. Nobody's talking about it. And I don't understand why, because I think Fernando Mendoza is a near carbon copy of what Indiana had a year ago in Curtis Rourke, who took this team to the college football playoff. I think Fernando Mendoza is a top 5 quarterback in the Big Ten. I think he's a top 15 quarterback in college football. I really, really do. He's not going to blow you away. His arm strength isn't the craziest thing in the world, but he makes the right decision. He doesn't turn it over, and he never feels the pressure. He just plays the game the right way. And Indiana's offense, with his offensive coordinator is Shanahan now, he's going to be in a system that is just relaxed, simple, and wide open. He's got 2 of his best receivers from last year's team on Indiana coming back, and Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper. You've got a much improved offensive line with 3 starters pulled out of the portal, including Pat Coogan from Notre Dame, and you've got a running back room by committee. And so I don't know why nobody wants to talk about Fernando Mendoza, but I think he should be the highlight of the transfer portal additions for Indiana on the offensive side of the football, because I expect him to play well, especially in this game against UCLA. But I hope that Nico pans out for UCLA. I really do.
And my question for you is, do you feel like Indiana will take a hit with the QB guru, the QB whisperer of sorts, going from Indiana, going to UCLA? It was supposed to be one guy, supposed to be a lot of youth in the UCLA room. And how long do you think that Tino will actually stay at UCLA as the offensive coordinator? Because remember, the Bruins a couple years ago went after Danton Lynn, kind of an unknown guy. Tino more of a known commodity at this point. Danton Lynn stayed at UCLA for a year and obviously went to USC. The Bruins are still okay with the Kaika Malloy as the defensive coordinator. How long do you think he stays? And you already mentioned how much he could do for Nico.
Yeah, I think he'll help Nico a ton. I really, really do. Just in kind of settling him down and helping him see the field and not just scramble and break everything down and just kind of, spaz out when things go wrong. I think Tino's really going to help Nico in that situation. I think Indiana will feel it, but not as much as some people think. And I think Tino Sinceri is going to be a head coach within the next 3 to 5 years. I really, really do. I think he's that good. I think he is that talented. I think his IQ is that high. I think that was one of the best hires in the offseason that not enough people are talking about because he was a quarterback coach. Now he's the OC right at UCLA. He is somebody who will be a head coach in the next 3 to 5 years, in my opinion. I really, really think that. But I think the Hoosiers are okay in the quarterback spot, and UCLA is still to be determined. But we could have ourselves a battle when these two teams come together on October 25th in Bloomington. We'll talk about the game, what it means for both teams, and where it falls in the schedule. That's coming up next here on a Locked On Crossover Edition. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers and Locked On UCLA is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, right? You watch it, you listen to it, you keep up with it on your phone, so why not make it a little bit more thrilling? And with FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are out there getting sunburned on the beach or shooting 130s on the golf course like Spencer McLaughlin. So you can use FanDuel right now. Use the app, use the website, doesn't matter for golf, WNBA, NASCAR, F1, whatever you want, FanDuel has got it for you. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, we continue on with a Locked On crossover of Hoosiers and UCLA. These two teams meeting on the football field this season coming up in late October, the final game of October for us on October 25th in Bloomington. And I want to discuss first where this game falls on the schedule for both teams, because I think that's fascinating in all of these crossovers and conversations that I've been having. For the Hoosiers, it comes in the point of the season where we're expecting to be building some momentum. Our non-conference game, know that we've got a tough game against Illinois, road game against Iowa, road game against Oregon. But then we play Michigan State and then UCLA at home. And this is where we expect the Hoosiers to start building a little momentum. What about UCLA? I pull it up and look at it. It's in the middle of, I don't know how to describe the schedule. Not terrible, but not easy either, right?
It's an interesting spot because UCLA has very manageable non-conference games. You can say what you want about Utah, the Dan Mullen-led UNLV Rebels, and I think obviously New Mexico should lead to a win. So they should have a manageable non-conference. In this part of the Big Ten schedule, they got Northwestern on the road. They host Penn State, obviously a huge challenge. Go to Michigan State, and then they host Maryland. So a lot of back and forth travel-wise at that point. It comes right before a bye in early November. There's a lot of teams that have 5 games in November. UCLA does not have that. They get a bye after the Indiana game, so maybe a little bit beat up. But with the 2 byes in college football this year, shouldn't be too much of a problem in this point. It's just UCLA could be in the middle of a hot stretch, mixed in with maybe a Penn State loss, where a win against Indiana could really satisfy that bowl requirement. I think UCLA might do the opposite of last year. If you're looking at a worst-case scenario, start hot and finish with a slow finish if you want to look at a worst-case scenario. Or it could be that building block win for Indiana. That was it early for last year. This year, I think if UCLA is to win that game, you host Nebraska, you go to Columbus, you host Washington, go to USC. That's a lot of big names on the back half of the schedule. But it'd be a good road win for UCLA to get. And you know what everybody's going to say, Jacob? What would the weather be at that point in October in Bloomington? What can the LA fans expect if they're going to make that trip out there?
I hope it's cold. I hope it snows. I hope there's ice in the stands, maybe at Memorial Stadium. No, I want you guys to have fun. And I hope UCLA fans travel because Indiana football, in just the 1 year that Curt Cignetti was here and getting to the college football playoff, he came in and made a lot of demands from the athletic department, from the program itself, and from the fan base to buy in, right? Buy in financially, buy in emotionally, and buy in physically, a la your presence. Be at the games. And Indiana
and stay all 4 quarters.
And stay all 4 quarters, yes. Because not because you're winning, but in the past it was because you were losing. But fans showed up and they are supporting this team. And so I hope by this point that Indiana is, an undefeated team. 1 loss is probably more realistic. 2 losses could be, but I expect the fans to still show up. And I encourage UCLA fans to make the trip. Bloomington's an awesome town, man. It's one of the most historical college towns in America. And at this point, unfortunately, basketball season won't quite have started yet, but it'll be right around the corner at this time. But my goodness, dude, I look at y'all's schedule and How in the world did it end up to where you do not play 2 home games back-to-back or 2 road games back-to-back? You're literally home, away, home, away, home, away. The entire schedule. You never play back-to-back home games or back-to-back road games. And playing in UCLA, you mentioned it. You're going to travel to Chicago for Northwestern, back home for Penn State. You're going to go to East Lansing, back home for Maryland, here to Bloomington, back home for Nebraska, back to Columbus, and then you finally stay on the West Coast with Washington and USC. I mean, I think by the time the Indiana game comes around, your team could just be flat out exhausted.
They certainly could be. They do have that bye before the Northwestern game, so they get a quick trip in to Chicago. I think from LA to Chicago, it's not the worst trip in the world, and hopefully they'll be riding off the momentum of what I would think would be a UCLA win over Northwestern. And the buzziest game, I should say, on the home schedule is Penn State. If you're going to make a big statement or pull off a big upset, that would be something. So you wonder what the emotions will be like those next couple of weeks. But yeah, last year was road. They showed the map of the airplane miles flown for UCLA. It was to Hawaii, to LSU, to Penn State. This year, not as crazy, but I don't think they're helped out with stretches. They're not helped out with stretches of home games. I wonder if that will help them or hurt them this year. I'm not entirely sure. But because USC is right down the street, literally, I think they're not going to always do UCLA favors because that game is an hour drive, 2-hour drive with traffic at some points.
Yeah, I don't envy you living in Los Angeles, my friend. And look, I look at the last 5 games of the schedule: at Indiana, home for Nebraska, at Ohio State, home for Washington, and at USC. That's no joke. That's a brutal into the schedule because I think Washington's going to be a very good team. I, of course, expect Indiana to be a very good team, Ohio State to be a very good team,
Nebraska to be improved.
Well, that's the thing. I think Nebraska and USC are the 2 wild cards there. If those are good teams, you better get your wins early, I think, just because that's a tough end to the schedule. So that brings us to the next point of this conversation is how important could the Indiana game be for you guys out in UCLA?
Again, I think I might have stated this before, maybe not, but the Indiana game could be that bowl game. Normally, you think of there's one game late in the schedule, like that could be that 6th win that could get you into the bowl game. For UCLA, if you're looking more of a kind of a negative perspective, then late October, that could be that win that gets you to the 6th win. For me, though, with a more positive outlook, you could use that as a big win going into the bye week, and then you host Nebraska. And that's going to bring a lot of fans from Nebraska. That's going to be an energized Rose Bowl for sure. UCLA went to Nebraska and won. They were competitive and probably could have and should have beaten USC and or Washington last year. And UCLA's beaten USC at the Coliseum the last couple of years. That's not a scary place for them. And they host Washington. So even though it's brutal, I do see the point, and I can see both sides. It's brutal. I'm afraid of that stretch, but UCLA can also win 3 of those games. And, we're not talking the one in Columbus, right, at this point. I think that's not a fair thing to say at this point.
Right.
But to win all those would be a tall order, but it is realistic to see in games where last year they went back and forth with those teams. They could do the same thing this year, but every team is expected to improve. UCLA better have everything firing in all cylinders with Nico and company by the end of the year.
Yeah, that game being in Bloomington definitely helps the Hoosiers, of course. It's one that is squeezed right in the middle of a 3-game stretch between our road trip to Eugene and our road trip to Happy Valley. We play Michigan State at home, UCLA at home, and then a trip to Maryland after Oregon and before Penn State. And as I said earlier, I expect this to be the part of the schedule that Indiana starts to build some momentum, that they start to string some wins together. I expect the Hoosiers to be favored here. Our friends at FanDuel don't have a line out for that just yet, but I expect them to be favored in this
What number
game.
would you put out there, Jacob? Are you going to throw out, are you going to use last year's results as the thought? Or you're going to be greedy? Or are you going to go with like a 9.5, give you like a 2-possession pull away type of thing where it's like, all right, you could see it 10, you could see it close.
I'm looking at UCLA's schedule to see what they'll be. I mean, look, if UCLA's playing good football,
that would be a good game with good records.
I think that's exactly what I was going to say. I could see this being a game between 2 one-loss teams, legitimately. I think that could actually happen, and then you could see this thing be single digits. I think on paper, Indiana's 10 10 points better, but at this point it's hard. So I'll say 9.5 to 10.5. I think that's a favorable line. And to be honest with you, I hope that this is a game between two one-loss teams. I think that would be really, really good. Even if UCLA or Indiana have two losses, that would make the impact of this game and the hype around this game even greater. And for Indiana's sake, I hope it's not, just because we could try to stack some wins in between our two tough ones, but there's a chance this is a really fun one. And it's going to be in Bloomington again on October 25th. UCLA coming to the Hoosiers, coming to Bloomington. So I'll say 9.5 to 10.5, Zach. I think that's a favorable line. What about you?
I mean, I would think definitely like in that same range, maybe 10.5 to 11, but I think we're on the same boat. Like, this is one of those games where it's probably one possession and like a late field goal could push it to a 2-possession game that was really good. And it's one of those, this is the game for both teams where you're sprinting to the finish. It can help define the end of the regular season, where if you're Indiana, I'll ask you this, do you think they'll make a playoff? Can they push? Or are they looking for a 10-2, 9-3 like season? UCLA wins this game, they have a potential to get themselves to that 8-4, 9-3 mark. And that helps Deshaun Foster immensely in recruiting. They win that game, you got a lot of things hopefully building by the time recruiting starts in late December, portal and early signing day, and all the crazy dates that are going to switch by then anyways.
Yeah, point being, this is a big game for both Indiana and UCLA in Bloomington on October 25th, but that's on the football side. We have basketball to still talk about because there's all sorts of things going on, and I'll tell you why Indiana is going to blast UCLA. No, I'm just kidding. Maybe. We'll talk about basketball coming up next on a Locked On Crossover Edition. All right, final segment on Locked On Crossover of Hoosiers and UCLA. I'm Jacob Goins of Locked On Hoosiers. He is Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer of Locked On UCLA. The fans, the people, they knew we were getting to basketball. They knew we were going to end talking a little hardwood. And there was some off-season rumblings here, Mr.
In-season. Yeah, I would say in-season rumblings a little bit too.
Yeah, I would see. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair to say. At the end of the regular season and then into the offseason, because it's no secret Indiana was looking for a new head coach. Mike Woodson finally got the boot, or he quit or retired or parted ways or whatever language they want to use. And he finally got out as the head coach, and we were looking for a new one. And we were just knocking on doors and sending out texts, hey, you up type of thing. And your head coach, Mick Cronin, kind of got thrown around a little bit. Were you worried at all about your man leaving UCLA for Indiana or another job in the offseason?
I'm not entirely too sure I was, especially you look how quickly that after they got eliminated, they were able to bring in Donovan Dent. They were making moves. They were making moves, and they got, the 1A, the number 2 option in all of the portal at the position they needed to improve the most. And while the Adai Mater loss in the transfer portal to Michigan hurts, it clearly meant he was making moves. Like, I think Mick Cronin wants to make his big swing, right? This is a team that this year could make some noise. I thought last year's team could do a little bit more than they did. This year's team, with a lot of good pieces Mick Cronin likes to have, could make some noise in the tournament in the Big Ten. But with how quickly they swung that, I think this is one of those, all right, this season defines his legacy and will prove long-term extension or seats warming up. I don't know if last year was that case. As much as it was a little rumor mill to Indiana, I don't think that was ever going to be the case, even though his dad's still closer out there and there's connections to his family back east.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, look, there were approximately 82 names that were thrown around for the Indiana job. I mean, we're talking about Jay Wright, Bruce Pearl. I mean, everybody out there was a possibility for Indiana. They landed on Darren DeVries from West Virginia, who was there for a year. He's now in Bloomington for year 1. And what's unfortunate about these two teams this year, Zach, is the idea that they only play one time. And we come to you. Indiana comes to Los Angeles. We don't know what day that'll be. We don't know what time. We don't know exactly where in the schedule yet, since Big Ten basketball schedules have not been released. But overall, what is your confidence level in UCLA basketball heading into 2025 and 2026? Confidence level, and then realistic expectations. You were kind of talking about it there with Cronin himself, but just for the team as a whole.
It seems like, looking at various sources from those early out of season or, heading preseason, like bracketology rankings, looking even our own rankings from Andy Patton and Isaac Shea, there's still like a weird gap as to what we think UCLA could be. Is it a top 5 team, or are they not a top 25 team? Now, I think one is a little more ridiculous. UCLA is certainly a top 15 team. It's the lack of presence in the post that gives me some hesitation to go out there and say they're a third weekend team. And we know what a third weekend team means when it comes to the NCAA tournament. But they're definitely a top 3, top 4 contender in the Big Ten. That's a realistic comparison. Even though it was a little dicey this last year, took some help to get the top 4 seed in the conference tournament. They were there. They got some wins. The hesitation is, how did they fare on the road? UCLA, outside of an Indiana win, did not really fare that well on the road off the West Coast. They really didn't.
Yeah.
I think with what they're bringing back, the talent they brought in, any production in the post, UCLA can do things. So I think realistically, an Elite 8 would be a solid ceiling with a chance to get to the Final Four, and I think that's realistic, get to the Sweet 16. How about for Indiana?
Yeah, you started talking about lack of post presence, and all the Indiana fans started screaming at their laptops or their phones or their computers, because that's all they've been screaming at me for the past several months, is the lack of post presence that this Indiana team could have. We brought in a couple of guys, Sam Alexis, backup forward from Florida, and then you're going to have a Davidson transfer who's going to step in and be your main man. But this team is extremely guard and forward heavy. That's just what this team's going to be. They're going to run and gun. They're going to shoot. They're going to defend. They're going to force turnovers. That's what the Hoosiers are going to do under Darren DeVries. Just look at any of his other teams that he's had at Drake or West Virginia. And so while I think Sam Alexis and Reed Bailey, who is that Drake transfer, while I think they can hold it down, this team's just going to have to outscore folks, and just understand that we are a little bit undersized. And look, it's year one. It's a new coach. It's a new team. You know how many players we have returning from a year ago as of right now, Zach? 0. None. Not a single player from last year.
That's a lot more common in college basketball than that used to be 5 years ago. And it's absurd that teams can still be successful with those numbers. It's crazy.
It is. We're waiting on one kid, Luke Goody, to get his NCAA waiver approved or denied. We had 2 guys waiting. One just got denied. We're waiting on the other one as of this recording. And so it's a brand new team, brand new roster, brand new staff, brand new everything. And as much as it hurts me to say, because it's Indiana basketball, the expectation in year one for Darren DeVries, just make the tournament. Make the tournament, win some big games in the regular season, maybe win a couple big ones in non-con play. We have Marquette, we have Louisville, we have Kentucky on that schedule in non-con play. Win some big games, make it to the tournament, and then continue to recruit. And Joe Lunardi did an updated bracketology. This is a couple of weeks old, and it is July, so don't take this and run with it. Indiana's good. Or maybe you do. Maybe you just, maybe you put the house on it. I don't know. Indiana's considered first 4 out, or next 4 out, I think. UCLA's a 4 seed. Does that sound solid to you? Would you take, if I said, Zach, UCLA's a 4 seed right now, guaranteed on Selection Sunday, do you take it?
I would, considering I thought UCLA was very underseeded for this year's tournament. I thought they didn't get any help. I thought they should have been a 6 seed instead of what they got. And then the Tennessee draw in the second round was rough in this 2025 tournament, and playing in Lexington, Kentucky, traveling and playing in Tennessee's rivals' backyard. I thought that was rough. 4 seed, give me a West Coast regional, easy play in the Sweet 16, a lot closer to home. They'll take that after any travel in the Big Ten. Absolutely. How it looks and how it plays out, probably entirely different, because I've seen UCLA ranked as high as 4 in this offseason, and then, a little bit lower in the top 20. But with the top 4 seed, well within that top 16 range for sure.
I told you and UCLA football fans why they should make the trip to Bloomington on October 25th. Tell Hoosiers fans, as we wrap up here, tell Hoosiers fans why, whenever and however this game is played at UCLA during the basketball season, tell Hoosiers fans why they should make a trip out to Los Angeles.
Very likely the weather will be much better. There are times that during the LA winter, you might get a bad weather. Obviously, it looks very different from Bloomington, but you might be surprised. You're like, oh, it wasn't as blue sky, sunshiny as we thought. But, it'll most likely be better. I can't say at this very moment that the atmosphere in Pauley Pavilion for the men's games is going to be rocking. But if they do get some early momentum, the Big Ten games tended to have a little bit more energy with them. And it really depends on what Indiana brings with their record. If they bring a lot of buzz, you'll see the UCLA fans out there. Indiana fans will certainly make their presence known, hopefully at Pauley Pavilion. But it's not like going to Assembly Hall. It's not the same thing. I can't compare it. But if UCLA brings the energy, there's potential. And as long as it's not like a weird start time in the middle of the week, like a Tuesday, then you should probably get some energy. If it's a Saturday game, should be fun. Otherwise, come see a historic venue. Come see what is a beautiful campus, what should be great weather, and a rare, lengthy trip for Indiana. Mick Cronin talked about how many flights the Bruins have to take out east. Well, Indiana and the other schools don't have to fly that far in terms of as many trips to either coast.
Looking forward to the two teams meeting on the hardwood and then on the gridiron on October 25th. This has been a lot of fun. Always enjoyed doing this. We'll do some more getting closer to the matchup on the football field, and we'll do multiple during basketball season. In terms of Locked On Crossovers, he is Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer of Locked On UCLA. I'm Jacob Goins, host of Locked On Hoosiers. Until next time, stay safe, and we'll talk to you later.